All right, this is Danon Haggard with Hunters and Closers. I'm joined today with the CEO of RizePoint, Frank Maylett. Appreciate you, Frank, taking some time with us.
Glad to be here.
I do want to introduce him. Frank is recognized for his intensity, his intelligence, and integrity. He brings more than 20 years of experience leading, selling, and expanding software service organizations. Frank has also worked at other companies such as Workfront, InContact, Kavira Technologies, IBM, and Novell. And just last year, Frank was named the CEO of the Year by Utah Business Magazine and CEO of the Year by Utah Technology Council in 2016. He has won a Stevie for Executive of the Year in the 2017 American Business Awards. Frank is a 2014 recipient of Selling Power Magazine's 50 Best Companies in America to Sell For. We're going to talk a little more about that. And ranking at number 20 is when that award came in. He holds a bachelor's degree in business from the University of Phoenix and studied business administration and management at the University of Utah. So thank you, Frank, very much for joining us today.
Glad to be here. Thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely. So when you hear the words hunter and closer, what does that mean to you?
I think when I hear the words hunter and closer, it falls into lifeblood, right? That's kind of been my life, the sales trajectory, and trying to figure out exactly what I wanted to be when I grew up, and fell into sales, and the concept of actually being able to interact with people and do it, adding value to their world and monetary value to my world, i.e. my career, is just obviously dear to me, right? It's what I've done. So
awesome. So in 2014, you were the Executive Vice President of Sales at another SaaS company here in Silicon Slopes, Utah. At that time, you won an award from Selling Power Magazine for having the top 20 best companies in America to sell for. How do you make your sales environment the best?
yeah, great question. You know, when you think about sales, it really runs the gambit, right? It starts from guys that may be selling newspapers on the corner all the way to enterprise salespeople that are doing multi-million-dollar deals. But one thing about sales and what makes sales guys successful, salespeople successful, is sales leadership, right? Being able to get the right kind of leadership, helping them drive their individual lines of business to drive the revenue for the company. And I've always felt that sales leaders have to have two key traits. Number one is they have to be able to motivate. They have to have that capability of really helping the salespeople in their organization figure things out. And sales is tough, right?
Sure.
We all know that.
Absolutely.
It's never a straight trajectory, like Elon Musk and SpaceX up into space, right? A lot of times there's dips, there's valleys, there's challenges. There are signatures that don't come in time for the end of the quarter. And as a salesperson, you run this roller coaster of highs and lows. So a sales manager, sales leadership has to be able to create that environment where the team is motivated for the right reasons and constantly driving, even through the bad times, understanding that there's going to be light at the end of the tunnel. So that's the first thing, ability to motivate. And I think the second trait that sales leadership needs to have is the ability to empathize. Quite often I've seen sales leaders forget where they came from. They were the guy or gal with the quota that felt was unattainable. Their territory had just shrunk. The company's putting continual upward pressure on quotas and targets. And sales leaders sometimes forget that it's hard, and they have to understand that salesperson is going through an emotional change cycle as well as professional change cycle, and helping them guide their activities to success in that area. So if they're not empathetic and they don't relate to what the sales guys are feeling, it puts them in a really distant position. And I've worked for, and maybe you've worked for, sales leaders that do that quite often, right? They say, here's the number, go do it, and they kind of turn their back and walk away. And that's a failure. So back in, we got that award from Selling Power. I've always tried to build these organizations and my leadership teams and my salespeople with those understandings, that we get it, we get how tough the job is, and we can do it. and this is how we're going to do it. So those two elements come together for success. And that award was given to us as a team through surveys and all kinds of things that came into the organization, and we were very proud of that because at the time, I can't remember the exact placements, but we had outpaced and awarded a higher position than some great companies. I think Cisco was below us, and Microsoft, and a few others. So we were very proud that we had built an organization, coupled around those two principles of motivation, empathy, that was successful. And we had a great ride back in those days at Workfront. We did some great things.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Tell me, so just to build upon that a little bit more, showing empathy as a sales leader, how do you do that without demotivating, right? Because sometimes they do look for, the sales leader to understand what they're going through or to give them a break, if you will. How do you show that empathy but still push the number?
Yeah, let's make sure that we understand, when I say empathy, I'm not saying well, I'm not going to use that term. Let's use a different term. Becoming so empathetic that you believe that they can't get to where they need to be, right? So it's understanding it's difficult, understanding the quota's higher, understanding the funnel may be light, but a key to a good sales leader is the ability to help that rep figure out how to make it happen.
Okay.
So it's not just understanding it's hard, but it's hard and here's how we're going to do it. And that's the extra step that takes a lot of brain power from the sales leadership. They've got to take time to plan and to chart out the necessary steps to get to where they need to be. And some sales leaders, I'm not going to use the term lazy, but it's easy to get complacent and think that I've got a team around me or a big team under me, and they'll all be able to hit the number and do what they need to do, or the majority will hit the number and I'll hit my number, or I've got a couple of high-powered aces in the hole that will absolutely kill it and they'll carry the rest of the team. But good leadership's got to plan across the team and try to ensure that everyone makes it, and that takes effort.
That's awesome. I appreciate that. So what does as you look at culture's so important to a company, to a sales team, to an organization. How do you build a valuable sales culture? What are the key elements there in the culture?
Well, I think, first and foremost is trust. And when I've run sales teams in the past, one of the elements that I've really focused on, Dana, was really being honest and appropriately transparent with the team. So they understood that, we're not playing games, we're in this together, and together we're going to succeed. The second element is I love to celebrate success. And I think companies forget that. Yeah, there's a President's Club trip that most companies do every year, but it's success around the little things. Now, I've never had a gong, and we've never, closed a deal and run out, and like in the movies, and banged the gong and said, congratulations, a sale just happened. But we celebrate appropriately based on milestones or targets or big deals that come in, and we ensure that we recognize the people that are doing the work, that are closing the deals, and that they get that moment in the spotlight. I think that is so critical. I remember as a young sales rep, in fact, my first technology sales job, I was sitting in the big sales conference, right, and they were awarding the green jackets for sales guys of the year and biggest deal and all those kinds of things. And I was kind, and I applauded gently in my seat, watching the other guys take the stage. But inside, I was dying that it wasn't me. That it wasn't me. I wasn't on that stage. I wasn't getting the award because I wasn't the top sales guy. And I've always used that as a motivation, both as an individual contributor and as a leader, understanding that to a degree, whether we want to admit it or not, salespeople can be relatively narcissistic, right? We believe that we're really good and we have that confidence and that swagger. And providing salespeople that moment in the light to get that recognition on a more regular and or frequent basis builds their energy. And hopefully there's some people that aren't being recognized, that it builds motivation, that they want to be that person, they want to be that successful example of closing a deal or making their number or whatever it needs to be. I think back to probably one of my first sales gigs on is as a sales leader, is I focus heavily on the motivation piece. You know, always put extra contests in place, and we've done it in a different sort of way. I've given away a lot of cars. I think where you came from at one point, Workfront, we gave away a Dodge Challenger when the theme that year was
Awesome.
Challenge, and gave some Porsches away at another company, and we had a promotion that I absolutely love that people still speak about to this day, which was a fast start program. The first day of the quarter, we called it Time to Close was the name of the promotion. And I bought about a 6-foot jeweler's case, a vertical jeweler's case, with bright halogen lights, and it was plexiglass all around, and 4 or 5 shelves. And then I went out and I bought a nice Rolex, and I bought some Omegas. If you're watch people, they're very high-end watches, right? And then I bought, 3rd tier watches and 4th tier watches, and had about 60 or so salespeople on the team at the time. So we bought about 20 very expensive watches. And on the first day of the quarter, I rolled the promotion out and I said, okay, the first person this quarter to retire their quota, come see me. And we'll walk over to this case full of watches. And we had men's and women's and all kinds of things. And I said, you get to pick whatever watch you want. If you want the $15,000 Rolex, or you want the $7,000 Omega, or the $1,000 Tissot Speaks to You, whatever watch you like, you pick out whatever you want.
That's awesome.
Second person to retire their quota, come see me. Whatever's left, pick your watch. And I got to tell you, it was fun. We put it in the middle of the sales floor, and sometimes I'd look over, and there'd be 3 or 4 salespeople gawking into this display case, right? Saying, okay, that's the one I want. I'm going to get my quota, and I'm going to get that watch, and the other, and whatever happens to be. But it's these little moments of motivation,
Sure.
right, that keeps the team plugged in. It wasn't horrifically expensive for the company. And I think all the watches were gone by the 2nd month of the quarter.
That's awesome.
And we had a blowout quarter, right, as a team and as a company. So it's these little things that sales leaders really have to be inventive, be creative, think about, and execute, that drives that motivation amongst the salespeople.
That's great. Yeah, I've worked at different companies throughout my career, and the ones that do the best incentive programs like that, just there's so much more vibe and just excitement on the floor than there is when there's no incentive or something to work for that quarter. So it really does make a difference.
Yeah, let me add to the culture question, because I think another piece of culture is the dark side of culture that we as sales leaders have to make sure that we manage appropriately, and that's the non-performers, right? Mm-hmm. And too often, one company, local Silicon Slopes company called In Contact, when I joined, I was the EVP of Sales and Marketing, and there were literally dozens of salespeople in the organization that had never hit their number. That not only in the last quarter, but some in the last year hadn't even closed a deal, but the company had maintained these people on the payroll. And I moved quickly to make that change, and we moved the perennial non-performers out of the business. And I'll never forget, Damien, that one day, one of the salespeople came to me, one of the high performers, and thanked me, and said it was so demotivating in the culture that the company continued to hang on to non-performers, that we that worked hard and delivered our numbers, we felt like, what does it matter? What does it matter? So when you build a culture, you've got to think of the upside part of the culture, but also make sure you manage the darker side of that
Sure.
culture, and the performance improvements and getting people to where they need to be. And I think together you can really build a healthy culture amongst the sales team and within a company.
That's great. So you've talked a little bit about the characteristics that you look for in hiring a sales leader. What about a sales rep? What do you look for when hiring an individual contributor?
Years and years ago, I was I was in one of my early management gigs, and I at the time I was actually physically fit and on a treadmill at the hotel, and I had a sales conference coming up in a couple of weeks. And being a sales and marketing kind of guy, I was trying to think of what were the elements, what were the characteristics of good salespeople, and how do I communicate that to potential hires and to the sales team, and what's important to Frank, what's important to success, and I came up with the concept of I cubed, I to the power of 3. And that was kind of the marketing tag to my thought. And my thought was, I need to find and I need to inspire 3 key characteristics in salespeople. Number 1 is intensity. They've got to have drive, motivation. They've got to be, I'll call it the typical type A personalities. You don't see my foot down here, but it's always moving. I'm always high energy trying to get things happening, right? I need a salesperson that is driven. Right? And that's the first I, that's the intensity. The second I is intelligence. It's not critical to me what your background is or where you're coming from. What's critical to me is, can you learn? Can you learn